You're watching Dukascopy TV. I'm Sophia Eribo. Today's GDP figures for Italy can be seen as rather bad when compared to France and Germany, the Eurozone's other heavy hitters. Joining me to give his take on Italy's situation is M&G Investments' Stefan Isaacs. Stefan, is it too early to conclude that Italy is definitely coming out of its worst recession since the Second World War?
The numbers this morning would suggest it is probably too early to make that kind of statement. It would seem that the Italian economy is still very challenged. The industry sector was struggling, and I think that the numbers were certainly below market expectations. It would seem that all of the challenges that we've known about for some time with Italy, whether it be demographics and all of the structural adjustments that are needed, the banking system that continues to go through a deleveraging process, and arguably a sort of general lack of dynamism around the economy, is all sort of resulting in very, very weak growth, if any at all, and it's probably likely to weigh on Italian GDP for some time. My view has been that whilst Italy can continue to move sideways, we're not going to see the sort of trend growth that we were accustomed to pre-crisis, potentially for many, many years to come.
Data released by the European Commission last week shows Italy will hit a record high ratio of more than 135% debt to GDP, and public debt stood at a record 2.11 trillion euros in February. How worrying is this?
It is worrying in one respect. That sort of level of debt to GDP is at a stage where you would historically suggest it's commensurate with some kind of restructuring in the long term. Is it sustainable? Probably not. On the evidence of this morning's numbers and frankly the last few years, they probably won't be able to grow into that sort of debt stock. So you either have two alternatives. One is generate some inflation, which the Eurozone's really struggling with. I guess this morning we had some information from the professional forecasts that the ECB will be very reliant on next month that have reduced their expectations for Eurozone-wide inflation in 2015 and 2016. So that's just another challenge for Italy, especially with the level of debt that they have incurred. If you don't have any inflation and you don't have any growth, then it does have you question in the long run whether it's sustainable. I suppose the one big thing that Italy has in its favour is that it has huge domestic demand and a huge willingness amongst its banking system and its population to invest in government bonds. It's very much a part of the national psyche, and as a consequence, perhaps it is more sustainable than it would be in economies where that wasn't the case, and perhaps where they were more reliant on external demand for their government bonds.
And finally, Stefan, do you think Italy is dragging down the Eurozone's recovery?
Well, it's certainly not helping. If you look at the recent components of Eurozone GDP, Germany was clearly the winner. Italy was clearly one of the losers, and it is one of the largest economies in the Eurozone, so it certainly doesn't help. But even German GDP has been less than spectacular. Sub 1% is not really what you'd be hoping for at this point in a recovery. So I think it's very easy to lay the blame at the feet of the periphery, but the reality is that the whole Eurozone is still struggling. I think that it's very reasonable to assume that growth will be sub-trend for a number of years. We're probably going to really struggle to go back to the levels of growth we came accustomed to pre-crisis. My views are still, an ongoing weak recovery for the Eurozone, and yes, Italy certainly isn't helping. And this morning's GDP figures just put probably further pressure or further downward pressure on expectations for Eurozone growth in 2014 and 15.
Thank you, Stefan. For analysis on Dutch growth figures, be sure to check out Monica Gibson's interview with Chief Economist at BNP Paribas, Joost van Leenders.